I think we've all been on Instagram or Facebook or any number of different social media platforms, and we see these what look like incredible vacations that people are taking, and they take the pictures of their food and the different places that they're going, and it's hard sometimes not to feel that comparisonitis coming out. Here I am eating my my soup and they're eating their lobster roll. We have to be aware of how social media can make us feel, as in addition to the things that we actually hear and see from people as well.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we discuss all aspects of parenting using the foundation of understanding personality dynamics to raise independent, responsible, and resilient children. My name is Karen Wagner, founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. Let's dig right in with today's topic and have some real talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mindy Green. I'm one of the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, and I'm so glad that you could join us this evening. And I have my wonderful co-host here, and I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm so not used to seeing myself on screen without my name on there. That's so exciting. I'm Janet Krebs, also one of the parenting coaches. Happy to be joining Mindy tonight. Just the two of us tonight. There's a whole bunch of us in the collaborative group, but you just get the two of us tonight. So there you have it.
Our fearless leader is off spending time with her grandson and her daughter and other son up in Michigan. So we wish Karen well and are happy that she has that time away.
And Roseanne, who's not feeling 100%. And so Roseanne, here's to you.
Yes, to our dear Roseanne.
We're looking forward to you joining us.
Yes, absolutely. So since Karen isn't here and she was the one last time who was kind of leading us through it, I'm actually going to tag you, Janet, to start us off and explain what we are going to talk about tonight.
This is payback for the time I did that to you, isn't it? I hope our listeners, if nothing else, you understand that as parent coaches, at the very beginning, middle, and end of all of our conversations, we are moms and human, just like all of you. So we are never standing here as those that know everything. So there's a little bit of humanness. We actually thought it would be fun to talk about spring break, because it's spring break for most everybody in this country in one way, shape, or form, especially if you've got school-aged kids. And that looks very different for every school district, every town, every state. However, while that is a wonderful concept, we all celebrate spring, we get some time off, we get to separate from the daily schedule. There are some interesting downsides as well. One that just comes to mind is those parents that are like, eek, what am I supposed to do with my kids? I have to work. But we're not talking about that tonight. But we've got a couple of spring break realities versus the social fantasies to talk about. So this will be a fun one.
Yes, I agree. And I think that, and you and I have talked about this, about spring break and just that gap, right, of what we think we want it to be and how it really is. And one thing that I think that we forgot to mention to our viewers, if you are watching us, catching us. So with that being said, then, do you want to go ahead and jump into it, Janet?
Well, we've got a couple of things to talk about. So what would be number one? And number one on my list is comparisonitis. Do you remember Sniglets? Sniglets.
No.
If any of our viewers remember Sniglets, this was that will date me hugely. Sniglets are words that if they're not real words, they should be. So for example, one of my favorites was Cubolo, which is back in the day. And again, this is dating, but when you take remember the trays of ice and you had to kind of alternate the wiggle to get them out, right? And you'd flip it over and there was always one that stayed in there. That was the Cubolo.
Oh, okay.
Right?
That's funny. Yes,
Right?
it all was true.
Right. And acceleration was another one. And it was when you stand there and you push the elevator button, thinking that if you push it over and over and over again, it would just acceleration. That's what it was. Acceleration. Pushing it like 40 times as though it's going to come any faster. Comparisonitis is a sniglet. It should be a word, even if it's not. So for tonight's purposes, we're going to say, yes, it is a word.
And I love that word.
Comparisonitis.
Comparisonitis, yes.
Yeah. And isn't it, I should ask questions rather than making statements, isn't it applicable not only for our youth, but for us as adults as well? Everybody is subject to comparisonitis. So how does it relate to our discussion tonight? I'm lobbing it back to you.
Certainly. So when Janet and I were talking about this the other day, when we were coming up with the points that we really wanted to share, one of the things that we were thinking about with comparisonitis is that isn't there so much shame? And I remember feeling this, like that guilt, that niggling that I'm not giving my children what I think that they need. Not so much they need, but some of those wants, and especially I live in a very expensive area of the country outside of Washington, D.C. And there are lots of people here who have government jobs and they have, these really high paying, high powered positions. And so when they go on spring break, they go on spring break. I mean, we're talking about going skiing out west or, going, flying to an island or going to Europe on vacation. And, I remember just that feeling of that not enoughness, which is another sniglet, enoughness. Yeah. And comparing, having that comparisonitis really set in. So that's why we were thinking about this in terms of just the way that it makes you feel, the way that sometimes our kids view things as well, because they are definitely not immune to it. They see and hear what goes on with their classmates when they come back from these incredible vacations. So what else would you share with that?
Well, I mean, whether it's spring break is just a great place to start the conversation about it and to introduce the word into our vernacular, because comparisonitis is really throughout so many other aspects of our lives. What the kids are wearing on their feet, what's the latest, what is that? They don't call them sneakers anymore. What do they call them? Running shoes, whatever they are, right? The latest and the greatest, or, are your jeans, the coolest jeans, or are you wearing North Face, or are you wearing a knockoff? It's just for making crazy, whether it's wardrobe, the first car that a kid gets, is it the junker, or did your parents buy you, the brand new Jeep? It's everywhere. So spring break really is just a wonderful opportunity for our listeners to start thinking about where else does this show up in our lives? And am I even guilty of it as well? And I would say yes. And this is where we need a little grace, because we're all subject to it. It's FOMO.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about what you were saying with that. And I think that this is an opportunity, as we're looking at these different areas of our lives, that comparisonitis may pop up, and acknowledging the feelings that come with that, and then helping our kids, having conversations with them too, because they're, like I had said earlier, and you were saying, it's like they're not immune to it, because for them too, every aspect of their lives are on display, from what they wear to how they, I have two girls. I know you have a daughter, and I also have two sons, and you have a son. And, just even with the way that they, their haircuts, or, their, for the girls, the way that they style their hair, all of these things are huge in their world. And then how do we as parents help them work through that?
Yeah, I think when we were growing up, we used to call it keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yes.
And that's not even I don't even hear that anymore. Do you? I
No.
haven't heard that phrase in a long time. And so there you go, guys. If you're ready to give up keeping up with the Joneses, we're giving you comparisonitis as a new one. And the fact that it ends in itis means that it's kind of like a little bit of an illness or a sickness. Like it's not necessarily a good thing. It's anchored in FOMO, and we all know FOMO being the fear of missing out. And it's just, like we don't need to compare. We just don't need to do it. And like as parents, be mindful that if you're doing it and you're modeling that, or you're saying things out loud, then what are you sharing? What's the message that you're giving off when you say things like that? The Smiths just got back from their trip. I wonder how it was. I'm going to go talk to them, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. There's just, there has to be a way for us to manage it eloquently.
Right.
And I don't have all the answers. I just know that it's alive and well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that that's a really good segue into our second point, which is really being intentional with our language. And that lines up perfectly with what you were saying, because I think that we have to have some type of framework to be able to handle our own emotions about these things, because there is that envy sometimes. There is jealousy that can come out. And how are we framing that with our kids? And that's not to say that that it's not okay to feel those things, but it's what we do with it. How do we act on, managing that with our kids and just having that conversation?
Depending upon how old they are, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just tough. It's just really, really tough. I remember when, air travel used to be only, like it was very expensive. Now it's not so expensive, but we have to give grace to where we are in time. I will be the one to date stamp this particular episode, even though it will live forever, as being March of 2024. And we are in an economic, I'm not going to say crisis, but there is a lot of people who are really struggling right now with an inflation that is it's kind of running amok a little bit. And people are really feeling the squeeze to do some basic things. Grocery shopping, paying insurance has gone through the roof. Taxes, it's March, so taxes are due, and parents are finishing up taxes. And this is a time when we're we're down at the bottom, closer to the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People are really struggling with food and housing and all of those basic needs. And so spring break to them is like, what, are you kidding me? No, dear son, daughter, and are they supposed to say, I'm sorry? Or are they how do you respond to that? Because that's not what they want to offer their kids, but what's the language that surrounds that?
Right. And when you and I were talking the other day about this, I know that you had brought up about how to frame the conversations that we have with our kids, depending on their age. And of course, it should be age appropriate. But I think that you brought up a really good point that you didn't say to your kids when they were growing up that, you couldn't afford something. You used other language around that. And I thought you might want to share that, because that might be something that could be really helpful to our parents.
Well, it's in line with, do we have to go to work or do we get to go to work? Do we have to go to the grocery store or do we get to go to the grocery store? There's a whole mentality surrounding, thank you, I have money in my pocket to go buy the groceries. Thank you, I have a job to go to, and so I get to go to work. And it's just kind of a shift. And so when I was growing up within my family, it was we can afford to go away. I just choose not to spend our money that way currently because we're going to take a trip in the summer or something else. And that seemed to satisfy them as tweens. They understood, the checks and balance and a little bit of basic finance. And so that seemed to be okay. I don't know if that would fly today. I don't mind, yours. I mean, I got flown and groans. So does that work today? But it was never, we can't afford this, because that's anchored in fear. That leads kids to be like afraid to ask for shoes or the Oreos that they see on the shelf at the grocery store. Like, it can't be anchored in fear. But we also need not to make apology and be very careful with how we choose our language.
And you raise such a good point. And I'm just thinking back, I'm being transported back to my own childhood, really. And one of the things that my dad would often say to my sister and I was that, oh, it's not a good year. Now, let me preface all of this by saying that he had been a school principal, and then he decided for some reason to go into farming. So, there was a huge shift there. And I remember thinking that, he would say, oh, Mother Nature was against him. And then he would, because we lived close to the beaches on the East Coast here. And so he would always say the sun worshipers they were praying for sun, and that was withering his crops. And so I bring this up because I grew up with that concern that for some reason we might not have enough money. And so with my kids, then when they were growing up, because I have grown and flown as well now, that I really wanted them to be able to know that, we did have money, and that, like you had said with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we didn't need to worry about food and we didn't need to worry about housing. Now, some of the other things that we might like to do, like go on a more extensive vacation or something like that, that was always, something that I was able to put some parameters around, like, we're going to go for 3 days, because of your dad's work schedule or something like that. So I think, again, I didn't make it about the money so much as maybe more about timing and, other considerations that we needed to take into account. And, so I don't think that, like you, I don't think my kids felt like they were necessarily missing out, just that we might do things at different times than other families.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful example, including other aspects of how you made that decision other than the money. So again, being intentional with the language. Don't just focus on the lack, make it sound, and hopefully it really is an authentic response, but make it sound or communicate that there were other considerations that allowed you to make this decision to perhaps not travel this time of year. Or if you chose to do something like this year, we're just going to stay local because there's a fun festival that I really would like to see, or, whatever, I want to get my garden prepped or whatever it is. Or there's other ways to manage it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that really then ties into the other piece of this. And I'm going to pull up number 3 here, and that's social media deception. And that, I think we've all been on Instagram or Facebook or any number of different social media platforms, and we see these what look like incredible vacations that people are taking. And, they take the pictures of their food and, the different places that they're going. And it's hard sometimes not to feel that comparisonitis coming out. Here I am eating my soup and they're eating, their lobster roll. We have to be aware of how social media can make us feel, as in addition to, the things that we actually hear and see from people as well.
Well, and as the title so aptly states, the deception is what we have to be aware of, because I think by now everybody understands that there is a fair amount of deception about what people choose to display on social media. And if you haven't figured that out yet, then I probably just disrupted your entire life to let you know that what you see on social media ain't necessarily what it's all about in reality. So this is what people do. They want you to, they're only going to show you the best. And sometimes, like, I love the family photos. Like, sometimes I'll see a family photo of a family that I know just had an argument 30 minutes prior, and they're probably like pulling on each other's shirts and like whatever it is. Because, and sometimes, when you know the backstory, it's kind of funny. But in case you didn't know, there's a lot of deception on social media, folks.
There is. And I know that this is really timely, and I don't know if you've been following what's going on with Kate, Princess Kate, the UK.
Do tell, I have not been, but do tell, Lovey. I would like to know.
Well, I was just thinking that there are a lot of conspiracy theories going around right now because she hasn't been seen since Christmas. And so the palace had released a statement saying that she had planned abdominal surgery in mid-January. And so she hasn't been seen. So then people are really starting to freak out because they haven't seen someone who is very much in the news all the time. And so for UK Mother's Day, she had released a photo, or the palace had released a photo of her and the kids. And so that what they noticed, though, were all these discrepancies in that picture, that it had been photoshopped. And so then she said, like many photographers, she sometimes plays around with photoshopping, and she didn't do a good job of it. And so people were all over that. And so I guess I bring that up because it's really about that we don't know that what we're seeing is real. And so I think that that's where people were getting upset. They're like, has she died? And they're coming up with all these crazy things.
Oh my God.
Yes, it just is going, Janet, it just went crazy.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's just a good reminder, I think, though, for us and, in any stage of our lives, to recognize whether we see people who are these wonderful chefs and they're making these meals. Not every single meal that they make is going to be a beautiful, exquisite dish. They've had plenty of things go badly for them in the kitchen. And, when I've watched videos of, like social media reality versus the fantasy, and just like we said with this, and it's like, you see these beautiful mountains or whatever, but what you don't see is that there are hundreds of people there with you, and you just got to this little sliver of beauty. So you're not seeing all of it, you're seeing the highlights.
And I think we're talking around a point, so let's just nail it. It goes way beyond spring break.
Of course.
Again, just using spring break as an excuse or as an example to make the point that the deception is alive and well on social media. And depending upon the age of your kids, it's a really timely discussion for them, both as if they're allowed to have accounts, social media accounts, like what are they posting, and how are they perceiving or receiving the posts that they're viewing. It goes both ways.
Yes, it does. And we know that there have been several studies that show how much anxiety social media can produce with our kids, because they don't always have that filter to know what's real and what's not, or even what's possible. So I'm just thinking about, like, with TikTok, there have been TikTok challenges, for instance, and people make these look like they're fun and that nobody really gets hurt, or they downplay the consequences of some of these things that they're doing as well. And, kids have gotten hurt. And
I know of a little girl that was fatally injured in in a TikTok challenge right here in our community.
Right.
Like, it's no bueno.
Right.
But to a naive lens, to a naive filter, unless they have been educated by a mentor, an adult, a parent, whoever is in their lives to guide them through that, then they're going to see it at face value, because that's what our default is, face value.
Absolutely.
Frightening. It's actually frightening.
Right. And I think that this is where some of those conversations come in with our kids as well, is to really to teach them to be able to discern. And, part of this, of course, is that we need to be able to monitor what it is that they're seeing and what they're participating in. So that's where I think it's like really focusing on that connection, building that strong relationship so that we can have these conversations, because it can be uncomfortable. It can be awkward because we're having to face things about ourselves, that comparisonitis that we may be feeling and how it's making us, those emotions that we have, and then for our kids. And so it's really important to start early and do it often, to really connect with them before you dive into like a deeper conversation like this. I often think about the compliment sandwich. It's like you bring up something, with our kids, you bring up something that's not going to be so intense, and then so you just have a conversation, you're kind of warming them up a little bit, and then you go for whatever the topic is, and then you back off, and then you kind of soothe things over a little bit. And because we often think, and I know I did anyway, I don't want to say this for everyone, but I always felt like with my kids, I just wanted to get to the heart of the matter. And so sometimes I would forget that I needed to warm up the conversation, warm up the relationship a little bit, to then have the conversation that really talk about the points that I wanted to talk about, because I didn't want to scare them away. But I did sometimes in my over eagerness.
I probably needed you back then, because I'm pretty sure I just went right to the meat of the sandwich. Honestly, I probably just went right to the meat of the sandwich. And this would be a great time. Your area of specialty in the parenting coaching realm is the neuroscience behind that. So dare I say, or I'll let you finish it, but there is really a lot of room for us to say, or to at least understand, that before the age of 20 for girls, 25 for boys, that brain, I'll let you finish it, because educate the public.
Right. So neuroscience gives us such great insights into that developing brain, and it's not fully developed. And I've even seen some studies that show even up to the age of 30 that not all of those areas of particularly the area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is like the logical part of the brain, that part of the brain that helps you to make good decisions and to be able to interpret the information that you're seeing, it's not fully developed. And so what we see with especially tweens and teens is a lot of like risky, impulsive behavior. And that's because that their brain is being fully remodeled. And the way that it's being remodeled is it goes from the bottom to the top. And so the bottom part of the brain is that basic part of the brain that's really survival based and, very emotional. So that's why you can see kids, swinging up and down like they're on a roller coaster of emotions, that they are.
And if you think about even just the 3 points that we brought up, comparisonitis, communication, and social media deception, think about that in terms of a receptor, the receiver, that is unable to actually do that with a fair amount of accuracy. So keeping all of those 3 things in mind, even physiologically, like, it's impossible for our kids to get it right without a little help from us. And that's not even a guarantee. So that's your lane. And then since my lane is leadership, I would come to it from a different way. The comparisonitis, communication, and social media deception there is no room for us to be standing as anything other than the leader. And sometimes that just means, as all leaders are charged to do, making the hard decisions and delivering the tough message, i.e., we can't go on vacation this year, or we are not going on vacation, and not to be apologetic about it, right? And we just, and that's our charge as leaders of the family, to just kind of be firm and confident in our statements in that regard, in that conversation, so that there is no fear about it. It just sounds like, oh, okay, she spoke, he spoke. That's just the way it's going to be. And when they have, like, there's safety in that, right? There's safety in knowing that someone's got their back and just with authority says, this is not what we've chosen. We're going to do something else in June and we're going to save it for then. Like, okay, I'm good with that. I'm cool, right? But if a parent is lamenting at the table and they've got papers in front of them and there's like the taxes and the bills and the, and then they're like, are we going anywhere? Like, no, like that's a whole different message than standing in the doorway and say, your father and I, or I have decided we're going to save our big vacation for June. We'll find some fun things to do during spring break, but we're not going anywhere. And we'll figure it out later. Turn around and walk away. The kid's not going to think anything differently. Be like, okay, that's just the way it is. So leadership, I think, is also a beautiful companion to what we're talking about, you know, for especially for a brain that's not quite ready to process all of the innuendo that we're asking them to do, all of the discernment that we're asking them to do. Be a leader without apology. That doesn't mean you're a boss or you're a bully about it. You're just the person in charge.
And I think you brought up a really great point, and that's that there's safety there, and our kids will mirror what we are sharing with them. So if we're exuding confidence, if we're exuding, okay, this is, no big deal, we've got this, everything is good, then they also will receive that much better because there's that sense of relief. Okay. And that's not to say when they get older that they might have some more things to share about that. And that's up to you then to open that door for the communication about that piece. It may not change what the decision is.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, they may be able to help you figure out a vacation or what those activities are that you can do instead of something else or in addition to.
And I made that sound like that's like I said, it's not a bully statement. And that doesn't mean, just because I said that with such authority, doesn't mean that there isn't room for, hey, I know this might come as a disappointment to you. Right. So there's an acknowledgement, kind of like to your sandwich, right? Like a little bit of a preface of, hey, this may come as a disappointment, but I just wanted to let you know, we're not going to take a trip until June. Like at least they're going to feel heard. They're acknowledged, like, oh, she gets that I'm, a little disappointed that we're not going to go someplace because I know 4 of my best friends are going someplace really, really super cool. And now I'm not going anywhere. But okay, she gets it. She knows.
Right.
There's a difference in how you say that. So I just wanted to make sure that our listeners aren't sitting back going, gosh, she's brutal. I was just trying to make a point.
Yes. And I think it was what you said was beautifully stated, because there is room for conversation around that, and at the same time, your kids want you to be the leader and you're the role model, and they're learning those skills that they're going to need to have to be resilient adults.
I truly believe that in my heart and soul, that our kids are begging for us to take leadership, especially now when their worlds are so chaotic and so open to interpretation that yes, I absolutely confirm. And we can all confirm with people that we've spoken with families that we've worked with, that will confirm exactly that they feel safe and affirmed when they're getting clear messaging. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're getting close to the end of our time. And so we wanted to thank everyone. Please know that as we were talking tonight, and I know Janet had brought this up several times, that we're using spring break as a segue to really thinking about comparisonitis and, social media and the way that we speak to our kids, like that language that we use, the FOMO, about all aspects of our lives. It's not just about spring break, but it's a good time to talk about it because these things are very prevalent perhaps in your minds as spring break is getting ready to come up. So on that note, we will be having our next episode coming up the first Thursday in April. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. Yeah. And so to be the first and third Thursdays of each month that you can catch us. And I'm not sure if who will be on next time, but we hope that you'll join us for this real talk with the Parenting Blueprint coaches.
And in the meantime, how will you use comparisonitis? And the challenge is, think about that. Like, where does that creep into your life? And if you are so inclined, it would be super fun if you were just to post in the group, like, yeah, great word. I use that in fill in the blank. That would just be fun to share. So we're going to coin this word. So help us use it and let us know how you're going to use it. That would be just fun.
Yeah, we would love that, because we want to make sure that whenever we're talking about things, that these are continuing conversations. It's not just a one and done, because these are things that impact us as parents and how we raise our kids. And so please continue the conversation in the group and in the comments, and we will make sure to get back to you if you have any questions.
Yay!
So on that note, we're going to go ahead and sign out, and thanks for watching.
We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye now.
Bye.